Statistically speaking, the Wild West wasn't quite as wild as the movies would have you believe, but don't let that fool you. Danger was everywhere. Outlaws, rattlesnakes, drunken duels, and dusty trails made survival in the frontier anything but guaranteed. Everyone likes to imagine themselves as the tough cowboy who'd outlast it all, riding into the sunset with a grin. But the truth? Chances are you wouldn't have made it very far. Yes, you. You would have died in the Wild West. But before we dive into all the grisly, strange, and occasionally hilarious ways the frontier could have ended you, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Sleepy Historian tonight. Trust me, you don't want to miss out on the rest of these journeys into the past. And while you're at it, drop a comment below and let me know which part of Wild West life fascinates you most. The shootouts, the saloons, or the diseases that terrified entire wagon trains. All right, partners, saddle up and draw. Because while Western films make it seem like every dusty street echoed with duels at high noon, reality was far less glamorous. Those quick-draw showdowns were rare, messy, and usually fueled more by whiskey than honor. The truth is, the Wild West was full of risks that had nothing to do with staring someone down over a revolver. And tonight, we're going to walk straight into that danger together, step by step, snake bite by snake bite, and maybe even cholera by cholera. So dim the lights, settle back, and imagine yourself in boots on a creaking wooden boardwalk, revolver at your side. This is the story of how you would have lived and almost certainly died in the Wild West. Part 1. Duels, Legends, and the Gunpowder Myth. 500 words. Statistically, the Wild West was never as reckless as Hollywood painted it, yet it was still a place where life could end abruptly. The image of two gunslingers staring each other down at high noon, counting off 10 paces before drawing, has become folklore. In truth, duels of that kind were rare, far rarer than the dime novels would have you believe. When they did occur, they were often the result of boredom and whiskey rather than a matter of honor. More clumsy shootouts than elegant standoffs, these fights usually ended within seconds, with both men diving for cover rather than standing tall like silver screen heroes. Wyatt Earp himself, one of the most iconic lawmen of the West, once wrote that the man who took his time, not the one who drew first, usually walked away alive. It wasn't about speed, it was about patience and accuracy. This truth became bloodily clear on October 26, 1881, when Tombstone, Arizona, became the stage for one of the most famous gunfights in history, the showdown at the OK Corral. The Hart brothers and Doc Holliday squared off against the Clanton-McClory gang. Within 30 seconds, 3 members of the gang lay dead. History would forever debate who shot first, but the result was undeniable. The fight immortalized Wyatt Earp and cemented Tombstone's reputation as one of the West's toughest towns. Not every man survived on bullets and bravado, however. Some, like rodeo legend Bill Pickett, staked their legacy on sheer courage. Pickett was famous for bulldogging, leaping from horseback to wrestle wild steers into submission. Crowds adored him, and he even managed to make it onto film, though no known footage of his feats survives. Yet the rodeo life that made him famous also ended him. In 1932, a horse he was roping lashed out and trampled him, ending his career and his life. In the Wild West, danger didn't always come from a six-shooter. Sometimes it came from the very animals you rode beside. Part 2, Calamity, Cards, and Betrayals. 500 words. Few Wild West names carry as much weight as Calamity Jane. Martha Jane Canary. By birth, she was at once both feared and beloved, a crack shot, a devoted caretaker, and a woman of endless contradictions. She spent her years in the rough mining town of Deadwood, often tied to the memory of Wild Bill Hickok. Hickok's death at the poker table, a bullet to the back of the head, left her grieving, and she remained close to Deadwood until her own. Tragic end, but fame in the West was never easy to carry. Exploited by others and betrayed by her own demons, Jane fell deep into alcoholism. Newspapers mocked her as a washed-up drunk, and the Sioux Valley News wrote bitterly of her being thrown in jail alongside plain drunks. Reduced from frontier hero to laundress, Jane's final years were hard and lonely. Pneumonia claimed her in 1903, and by her request, she was buried next to Wild Bill Hickok, who by most accounts might have preferred a seat at the card table. Wild Bill himself had once lived as one of the West's great gamblers and gunmen. His health, however, betrayed him. Rumors suggested venereal disease had weakened his eyesight and plagued him with pain. Still, Hickok kept gambling, his life revolving around cards and chance. One fateful game in Deadwood sealed his fate. After a night of winning, he showed kindness to a broke gambler named Jack McCall, giving him money for food. But the next day, McCall repaid generosity with murder. Approaching from behind, McCall shot Hickok in the head while he sat at the poker table, holding what would become known as the dead man's hand, aces and eights. It was a brutal reminder that, in the West, betrayal often killed faster than bullets. Part 3, Disease, Dust, and Death on the Trail, 500 words. Imagine setting out on the Oregon Trail in 1873. Your wagon creaks westward from Independence, Missouri, and packed with supplies and the fragile hopes of your family. The horizon promises freedom, but disease waits along the trail. Dust makes you cough, but soon the cough deepens, too deep. Dysentery, diphtheria, and cholera stalk the wagon trains, invisible enemies that killed more settlers than any outlaw ever did. Cholera was the true terror. Spread by contaminated food and water, it could wipe out half a settlement. The symptoms struck hard: severe diarrhea, dehydration, kidney failure. For the unlucky, death could come in days. With doctors scarce in the frontier, the cure was often quarantine, abandoning the sick to die alone so the healthy might survive. Children, parents, entire families vanished on the trail, their graves marked hastily beside wagon ruts. And yet, this tragedy somehow became the basis for a children's video game, the Oregon Trail. For generations of school children, "You have died of dysentery" was a punchline, but for the pioneers, it was a devastating truth. Even Native American tribes suffered atrocities during this period. On April 30th, 1871, the Camp Grant Apaches, who had agreed to peace, were massacred by settlers, Mexicans, and rival tribes. 150 were slaughtered, children kidnapped and sold into slavery in Mexico. Though President Ulysses S. Grant demanded justice, a jury acquitted all 100 attackers in just 19 minutes. Justice in the West was rarely just. Part 4, Bandits, Betrayals, and Bloody Endings, 500 words. If you lived as an outlaw in the West, chances are you wouldn't become a legend like Jesse James. More often, you'd be a petty thief caught in a botched robbery, praying for a merciful hanging. Hanging was considered humane, the fall snapping the neck instantly. But mercy was relative. When Tom Blackjack Ketchum, who weighed nearly 200 pounds, was hanged, the force decapitated him completely. Swift, yes; merciful, hardly Jesse. James, however, did become legend. His robberies and reputation made him a hero to some and a menace to others. But legends attract betrayal. In 1881, railroad companies placed a bounty of $10,000, nearly $300,000 today, on Jesse and his brother Frank. Robert Ford, a man James trusted, succumbed to greed. He and his brother Charlie moved into Jesse's house, biding their time. One morning, when Jesse removed his coat and laid aside his gun belt, Robert Ford shot him in the back of the head. The Ford brothers were pardoned and paid, but history branded Robert Ford forever as the coward who killed Jesse James. His name became synonymous with betrayal, his legacy forever overshadowed by the man he murdered. Part 5, Broken Hearts and Vanished Men, 500 words. Not all deaths in the West came from bullets or betrayal. Some came from sorrow itself. Kit Carson, legendary frontiersman, explorer, and fighter, endured a life of hardship, yet survived countless perils, blizzards, battles, and deserts. But in 1868, tragedy struck closer to home. His wife Josepha died during childbirth. Grief consumed him, and within weeks Carson himself succumbed to an aneurysm. Friends said he died of a broken heart. Others, like Charles Earl Bowles, better, known as Black Bart, managed to escape the West with their lives, though not without scars. Black Bart was a gentleman bandit, famed for robbing stagecoaches with courtesy and style. He never robbed passengers, only the strongbox, and occasionally left behind mocking verses of poetry. For years, he seemed untouchable, pulling off 28 successful robberies. Eventually, though, he was caught and sentenced to San Quentin prison. Upon release, he swore he was finished with crime. True to his word, he disappeared quietly, vanishing from history as mysteriously as he had entered it. Unlike many, Black Bart managed what so few achieved in the Wild West, a peaceful ending. Part 6, The Reckoning of the Frontier, 500 words. The Wild West was less about quick-draw duels and more about the quiet, creeping dangers of its age. Disease, betrayal, poverty, loneliness, these killed more than bullets. Heroes like Wild, Bill Hickok, Calamity Jane, and Kit Carson became legends, but legends didn't protect them from death. Bandits like Jesse James were immortalized in songs and films, while their killers were damned to infamy. The frontier was a place of contrasts, brutal yet romanticized, lawless yet bound by its own strange codes of honor. Some died in glory, some in shame, others in heartbreak. And a few, like Black Bart, simply vanished into myth, leaving us to wonder what became of them. If you had lived in the Wild West, your end might have come by cholera, a rattlesnake, a bullet, or even a broken heart. Perhaps you would have been betrayed by a friend or left to die on the trail. Whatever the case, the truth is clear. Survival was never guaranteed. The Wild West claimed everyone eventually, so how would you have died in the Wild West?